Welcome to Butterflies of Wisdom, everyone. And now you may think, okay, Win, you're about to lose your mind when I tell you that the guest today has a podcast in a very unique niche. And when I tell you what it is, you're going to think, Win, why have you now got a gnome? And yes, I said gnome on your podcast, and of course did the voice for me before we started this call because I said I got my education in gnome school this morning. And so without further ado, I'm going to let David take it away.
Hello, this is Nunu, the gnome bot. Yes, this is David Steele, a.k.a. Nunu, from our show, A Quest for Magic and Steel. And actually, I play the gnome. I'm the host of the show that plays the gnome. And we do a D&D tabletop role-playing game that we play. And I do it with my family and some friends. My daughter, my oldest daughter, I have 4 girls and 1 boy, so 5 kids. My oldest daughter is the game master, so she leads us on the adventure and plays some of the characters as well that kind of join us on the journey. And then my second daughter, Shayna, plays one of our characters, Rashandala. And then we have my son, Josiah, who plays he's a fighter, warrior, and his name is Aeschylus, a human fighter. And then we have a marriage boyfriend who plays with us. His name is Brian. He plays a elf druid. And then that's for our first, maybe 3-4 shows. And then we have another friend of the show family that joins us. Her name's Alicia, and she plays a dwarf wizard. So that's the gist of the show.
Okay, so you do talk about disabilities in your show, because I was going to say that. LaShandla, who is a gnome in the show, I'm not giving it all away, she claims to be mentally disabled. And so why did you come up with such a unique niche? I mean, my God, David, you must have been at work one day thinking, I want out of this desktop, I want to do a podcast on something that the whole family would enjoy. I mean, I'm stunned that you did a podcast as a gnome. Is it to educate people about the history of gnomes or what?
That's actually a few questions there in one. So let me speak to Rashandala first. Yeah, my daughter Rashandala decided to play Rashandala, who is a demon breed or race. I'm sorry, demon race, humanoid demon race, and so she's kind of like I guess looks like a little devil, I guess, and she decided to play it as mentally challenged. And when she said that, she wanted to make it silly in a sense as far as her losing her memory. And if you listen to the show as it goes on, she was actually attacked by a great demon as part of this gaming that we play. This evil character that comes and attacks her and actually destroys her whole village and lays waste to her whole family and her friends and the whole village, and actually hits her with this power to try to control her, and it affects her mind. So she loses a lot of her memory, and I don't know what the right term is, but yeah, she basically becomes mentally challenged where she can't think straight, basically has difficulty. And we didn't do it really to be politically correct or to try to spread the word about, a disability, but it was more for the comedy side of it where she could just act silly. But at the same time, as we played it, as we played on, we found that, you know what, we could really do something special with this. So we did her
Yes.
character show, and we explained how she became this way, that she was attacked by this monster. And then later on, she has a dealing with her family that she lost. She misses her mother, and then she snaps out of it. And actually, her mother's love is what kept her from being totally mentally wiped. She was able to keep some of her memories. And as the show goes on, she starts to remember things and go back to the way she was originally. So that's kind of a neat part of the show. And as far as the gnome, I just wanted to the podcast in general. We play D&D together as a family, and we're pretty tight that way as a family with 5 kids. You know, it's we get busy playing games and having fun like that. I've always been into drama and audio and video, so I have kind of an audio background doing some voiceover stuff, and decided I found podcasts. Love podcasts. I started listening to a bunch of shows as I travel, and then I got together with my kids. I said, hey, we could start our own podcasting network. We love playing this. We love entertaining. I have an audio background. I have some stuff. Let's set up our own little studio down in our basement, and let's have fun doing what we do and make it a show that I would find entertaining, something that I would like to drive and listen to hours of it to be entertained. And so that's what we do. So we play this game, and I decided to be this gnome bard who is a singer just because I thought he was silly. I could have a high-pitched voice. And I like acting silly and corny, so that was why I picked that voice.
Yes, I could tell. I could tell by the show that you guys get really into character, and I'm like, gnomes, really? Gnomes. That's why I said at the top of the podcast interview, my listeners are going to think I lost my mind. Bringing actor behind the gnome on, but how I got educated in gnomes originally was my 2nd grade private school teacher every Friday afternoon. Now, granted, this was when I was 7, and so I started learning about hobbits. And, of course, my 2nd grade teacher did a really good job, not as well as you portray it, David, but she did a really good job explaining hobbits to this 2nd grade class. And, of course, me being me, I was fascinated by it. So I'm like, really? The history of gnomes is something that people don't necessarily think about as a podcast niche. And so I'm happy you're out there doing it. I'm happy that I've now found a podcast that is actually kid-friendly. Although, would you say that it's okay for the kids to listen to?
We definitely try to make it. We don't do a lot of cursing. I just don't curse generally. A lot in my normal life anyway. I just think it's offensive. I mean, I might, if I've hurt myself, I might have let a swear go once in a while. But generally speaking, in life, I think it's useless to use in the English language on an everyday basis. And a lot of shows like mine, the entertainment shows, do a lot of cursing. Like they think it's funny, and I'm actually turned off by that. So I told them when we started this that I wanted to make it friendly, family friendly. And I do leave in some things like, and I don't know, it's kind of a borderline there because I'll say certain words like, I don't say like SHI, I don't say FU, stuff like that, but words like, you know, like damn or we'll say hell, oh, what the hell, something like that once in a while in character, or, you know, I don't give a crap or, oh crap, you know, kind of like that, but and I'm hoping that's not too offensive, but so for little kids, no, I probably, when my kids were younger, I didn't want them to hear any of that. There's that. But then as far as the graphic curse words, we cut all that out if there's any that slip. And we just basically don't do that when we record. So hopefully that answers your question.
So what, it does. What age range would you say this podcast is meant for?
I mean, it's meant for, I think our aim is PG-13, so, 13 and up into, older
Okay.
adults. I mean, I'm in my late 40s myself, and I enjoy it, so it matters where you're at.
I'm in
My
my
daughter's in their 20s.
early 30s, and I enjoy it. So, could you please give us a sneak peek of what you're trying to do? I have listened to episode number 1, the pilot episode, and it was really fascinating to me. I texted you and said, "No, Miss, really?" And so the history of Gnomes and the history of Wizardry and the history of Harry Potter is a big cult. And so have you seen fan base grow out of this, or did you just start it for the fun of it?
Yeah. Well, again, as our family grows up, my kids are older now. I have 2 of them in their 20s. Another one's 19. Next is 18, and then my son's the youngest. He's 16. So they're all older now. But when they were younger, I used to read the Harry Potter series to them, and I used to do the voices. So they are educated that way, and they enjoy that, and they like acting silly and having fun, and that kind of wholesome, fun entertainment as a family. And by listening to podcasts, I've listened to some shows. We played the D&D games at home, and I don't know, for some reason I decided, you know what, we could do a podcast ourselves. And I had a few different ideas. I was thinking about doing an interview show. We wanted to do like a current event show. I actually have a drama podcast that I'm working on right now currently. And this one we decided, hey, we play D&D together. It's fun to get together as a family and play for a few hours together, this Dungeons and Dragons game. And I said, well, let's make our own game. Let's make our own fantasy world. We'll make the characters, make them, and my main goal was to make it entertaining. I wanted a podcast that I would enjoy listening to, something that I would long to download and play. I can't wait to play this next week's episode, an ongoing story, journey, adventure. And that was my desire in the beginning, and that's how it went. So our main focus, we do have a Patreon. We do look to maybe make some money in the future to do more things, do some video production. We actually have puppets. We're going to do a puppet show. So we want to do the show that we've already produced this last year. We want to clean up the audio and make it only our character voices and do a puppet show on video, like to put it on YouTube. So, of course, there's finances needed for that, with the cameras and all that stuff. So eventually, if we can get to that, awesome. If not, we just love entertaining for our own self, like, something we would like to listen to, and we want to share it with others. We like to make people smile and loosen up and, leave this world for a minute. That's why we like the adventure stuff, the fantasy stuff, that we can kind of forget about all the politics and the heartache and things of everyday life sometimes, and just step away and say, hey, let's have a fun, happy adventure just sitting in our chair.
Now, if you don't mind me asking, what do you do for your day job? I mean, does this podcast coincide with your day job or no?
No, not at all. I mean, I'd like to eventually. I started doing voiceover part-time. I did a couple book narrations. I did a few things, voiceover things online where some people needed character work. I've done that. I have another book that I'm in the process of doing now, and the author is putting them up on YouTube. So it's fun. I enjoy doing that. But that's not enough money to become a full-time job. So I still work as a truck driver during the week, Monday through Friday, and I also dispatch for police on the weekends part-time. So, and then I squeeze in trying to do the podcast. We do every Sunday morning. We record as a family. We'll get together in the mornings and do that. So.
Yeah. Well, so you do trucking as your main business. No wonder why you wanted to get into Gnomes. No wonder why. because trucking seems to me like the most boring job in the world because it's endless. It's endless, and I don't care who you talk to. At least now they invented podcasts, so you can at least sit in the truck and listen to podcasts. But it's like no wonder why you wanted to get into Gnomes, because you're stuck in a rock and a hard place because you're driving across country or you're driving in between states.
Yeah, I don't drive across the country, so I'm local, which is a good thing. Yeah. I have done that in the past, and talk about boring and you're away from your family. But now I'm local, so I just work during the day and then I come home at night. So it's not as bad. I have breaks in between, so it's definitely a lot better. And but podcasts, I became a lover of podcasts from the traveling I do.
I bet you did. I bet you did, because you need someone to keep you company in that truck. You need someone to keep you company in that truck. So what is other than your podcast, what is your favorite podcast that you like to listen to?
Yeah, I have a bunch of them. I don't think I could pick one favorite. I started out with just looking through, when I found I have an iPhone, and I've had an iPhone since the beginning. The iPhone 3 came out.
Yeah.
And then one day, I don't know, a few years ago, I saw this little purple app in there, it said podcast. I'm like,
yes.
I can, what is this?
Oh, yes.
Free?
Yes.
Yeah. And it was, I was one of those people that, I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know anything about the world, and I said, let me check this out. So I started downloading some music shows. So I didn't know how to search. I didn't know how to look for stuff, so I just typed in some names of. As a matter of fact, I think the first podcast I found was a music artist, like a singer-songwriter, and it was something on their website, and they had a link, and I followed it, and it went to that iTunes podcast player, and I said, oh, wow, what is this whole world? And then once I got into that, talk about addicted, I went nuts, and I was like, oh, wow. So now, though, my must-listens, I got to tell you, I like the news because I'm always on the run. I don't watch TV much. So I have a local, out of Philly, I have a local Philly news show. Actually, I have the world, NBC Nightly News, this is across the country. I like to listen to that every night, so I have a podcast of that. 60 Minutes has a podcast, so I download that as well, and they're my, every week I definitely listen to those. And then I have, of course, the School of Podcasting, Dave Jackson. I love listening to that, learn a lot of things from him constantly every week. And then for entertainment, there's a D&D podcast that I listen to, the Adventure Zone that I found after we started ours, and that's a blast. The Podcastification, I don't know, that's really cool. I listen to that every week as well. And then just some other shows. There's a couple NPR shows that I like, the TED Talks and some other, there's a comedy quiz show I listen to. But there's not enough time in the day for all the shows I can listen to.
No, there's not enough time in the day. No, there's not enough time in the day. So, excuse me for being dumb, and I'm going to ask you the dumbest question yet. But
no question is dumb.
No question is dumb. I thank you for that statement. David, explain to my listeners what D&D is. And,
sure.
Okay, I'm going to be sending people down a rabbit hole, and I'm going to mention something similar to D&D that people are going to be now wanting to get on their laptops, wanting to get on their iPhones, called Minecraft. Is D&D similar to Minecraft?
I have to think about that because I've played Minecraft. I know a couple of my kids do. It's not a game you play online. It's something you play almost like a board game or tabletop game. So you don't have a computer or no electronics involved. You can play online. That's a new thing that's pretty recent in the last couple of years. But so Minecraft, D&D could be. You could have some Minecraft episodes. I mean, we actually did one where we went tunneling and went somewhere. So, but there's no building. D&D, to explain it, is D&D means Dungeons and Dragons. So it's D and D.
Okay.
And it's an older game. I don't know when it came out, man, late 70s, but the 80s was a big time for it. And it's known as the nerd game or the geek game because I guess they're the people that got into it originally. The guy sitting at home before the video games were big. Playing this tabletop game. It's a role-playing game because basically you take on these characters and you can pick your character. You can be the gnome. You can be the elf. It's basically also like Lord of the Rings or the Harry Potter. You get the magic, the fantasy realm. You can have swords. You can have magic. Basically stuff like that in the old fantasy world. And basically you play with dice. So you have dice with the roll for a chance. So you'd say, okay, there's a big monster coming. You have to fight them. So you have this D20, they call it. It's a 20-sided dice. You roll that to see who gets to attack first, and everybody rolls, and you see the monster gets to roll as well. So the game leader, the game master, they call him the GM, which is my daughter, or the dungeon master. Even though we're not in a dungeon, that's just what they call it. So we're outside running around in the mountains, and she's the dungeon master. And then she's the one that leads the story, basically. And with our story, we do a lot of improv. They have stuff that really has a lot of rules. You can follow rules. You can read a book and learn a journey and follow it step by step, just like a regular game would have everything lined up for you. But the way we do it in the podcast is she has a basic idea of what she wants to do. She says, okay, you set off on this journey, and here's what happens. Now, what do you do? And then we, as the characters, to make it entertaining, we improv, and we play off each other. So I'll start off just saying what I think in character. Oh, I think I'm going to go over here and introduce myself. Hello, my name is Nunu. And I just see other people that I've never met before. I'm a real friendly gnome. Yeah. And I go introduce myself. Yeah. And then we didn't make that up. It's not written down. And we just play off and have fun and act silly. And then the characters act in character. My son's the fighter. He's a little standoffish, so he's more like, what are you doing here? Who are you? And he puts his hand on his sword. And so he acts in character. And it's fun because then we just act out. We sit around a table with these microphones, and we just play in real time, like in character. And then my daughter who runs the game will step in and say, okay, here's what happens next. Roll a dice. Let me see what you can perceive. What's your perception like? And then we roll a dice to see how high we roll, and then she'll say, okay, you don't hear anything because we rolled bad. Or if we roll good with a high number, oh, wow, you notice there's a bad guy coming around behind that tree. Look out. And, so it's basically dice rolling, and there's sort of chance with that. And then the game master that leads us on this story adventure. That's the basics of it.
Uh-huh. Okay, now it's got my education in Dungeons and Dragons and gnomes and all this fun stuff that takes me out of the podcasting realm, but still is in the podcasting realm. And so, okay, now I'm going to ask there's a semi-dumb question here. Is the dice you use for Dungeons and Dragons similar to Yahtzee dice?
Yeah, no, it's funny because that's like a cult thing too. The D&D community has dice that's real special. I wish I had them in front of me. They're actually out in the other room. But the D20 is the big one. Everybody says roll 20, or you get if you roll a 20, you get a natural 20. They call it a nat 20. If you roll a 20, they have 20-sided die. There's actually 100-sided die, 50. There's a 8, 10, 12, 4-sided die. So one looks like a triangle. So they're not the regular white dice. But there is a 6 dice, but they're more round with different corners. And you have the numbers written into it. So for certain things, like normally the D20 is the main one. So between 1 and 20, you'll roll the dice. and a higher number. If you get a 20, it's a perfect. That means you definitely win whatever you're trying to do. If you roll a 1 is called a nat 1, and it's a definite fail. So something silly will happen.
Not so good.
You know. Yeah, not good at all. So if you roll a 2, you're okay.
Not
Still,
good at all.
But the 1 is bad. The 2 is the best. I mean, the 20 is the best. And then it's little things like, okay, I roll in that the 20. I get a number from 1 to 20 that says if I will attack and if I can hit the person. And they have defense. So they have they call it an armor class. So normal armor class would be around 15. So if I can roll a 15 or higher, then that means I actually can hit him. If I don't roll a 15 or higher, something lower, then the game master will say, okay, you only rolled a 12, so you didn't hit. So what happened was you pulled back on your bow, you let the bow go, and then your crossbow, your arrow, started flying through the air, and then it just missed as it wings by his ear, making his hair fly, and he turns and looks at you, and now it's his turn. So that's how the story goes, as you roll the dice.
I love it. Here I thought I was
fun.
educated. Here I thought I was educated in Minecraft as an educator, but I am realizing that Dungeons and Dragons could be implemented in a educational setting if it if someone could do it. Because I thought
Absolutely.
I was educated in Minecraft. Well, obviously I'm not. Because the board game is dying out. And I'm of the 90s, late 80s generation, early 90s. And yes, I like Yahtzee, and yes, I like Minecraft, but let's get these kids away from technology and let's get the board games back into houses and back into schools. And so I'm thinking that somehow Dungeons and Dragons could be implemented in an educational setting.
Oh, absolutely. And the story, it doesn't have to be that fantasy thing with the demons and all that. It could even be way kid friendly. There's already things made like that where it's the role playing game itself. It might not necessarily be Dungeons and Dragons, but there's role playing games very similar that have all kinds of worlds. You have the pirates. It could be fantasy in space, like a Star Wars type thing. It could be any genre at all. It could even be, biblical times or whatever. It could be a historical setting. It could be a Wild Western thing. There's things like that already. And board games, if you don't know about it, like I was the same way not too many years ago. When I was growing up with my kids, we had the Yahtzee, Monopoly, Chutes and Ladders. I didn't know about this whole other European-style board games, the D&D. I didn't know about that till a few years ago. And there's a whole world out there. There's conferences, and, there's these GameCon, Gen Con, WizCon, there's PAX, where you go and you can play all these board games that these people are making. And actually Kickstarter, with that, the board games are the biggest Kickstarter people to make all this money because they have all these great ideas for these board games. Oh yeah, you can check it out. They're making tons of money making these great games. There's card games, there's board games, and these games are so cool. My favorite ones are the ones where you play as a group, as multiplayer, and it doesn't matter if you win or lose. There's ones where you just join as a team and you have this common goal to get to the end and kind of see if you win or not. Sometimes you win, sometimes you don't. It doesn't matter. You have fun playing together as a co-op. That's awesome. I love that.
That is awesome. And by the time you guys hear this episode, it will be Monday morning, and I'm thinking that next year, one of you guys in Teachers Land should probably implement Dungeons and Dragons or something similar to Dungeons and Dragons in your classroom, because so the kids can get off the iPads and actually have an educational experience in playing board games and learning how to take turns and learning math using dice and then learning all this stuff. And I want to know how this works in your classroom, because I'm now fascinated in implementing a board game like Dungeons and Dragons or Minecraft in your classroom. Anyway, that's just my 2 cents. I thought I was educated on Minecraft. As I said, I didn't even know there was a coach falling for Dungeons and Dragons. And yes, Yahtzee, and I didn't even know that until David taught me. See, the educated is always learning new tricks.
Excellent.
Excellent. So, where can the people find you, and where can people find this fascinating podcast?
Yeah, the podcast, if you go to our website, it's Magic and Steele. So Magic, the word and the word Steele is my last name. It's Steele. There's an extra E on the end, and we like to say the extra E is for entertainment. But yeah, magicandsteele.com. It has all of our links, all of our Twitter, Facebook. You can listen to our show right from the website, or there's links to going to iTunes or Google Play or however you want. Or you can even just search our podcast in any podcast player. Just type in Magic and Steele, and it'll come up.
Yeah.
And then on Twitter, I'm at David O. Steele. And then we have our Magic and Steele, which is at Empire Steele. So, but our website has everything basically.
Oh, the website has everything. And you guys have a new fan, i.e. me, because I'm so now curious into this podcast. Oops. Oops, so you got wind curious into Dungeons and Dragons. No, David,
Excellent.
I am sure you didn't expect that one, but I'm now curious. I'm now addicted to Magic and Steele. That's one of my favorite podcasts, and I'm not just being nice. And so before I let you go, I want you to ask me 2 to 4 questions that you have for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you, I have another podcast that I've done some interviews for called The Interview.space, and I want to do interviews. And so I do have a couple questions because I like to interview people from different parts of the world, people that I And as a person with disability, you talked about on your show, and I've listened to your show before, and from Joe Pardo, I've gone to his local podcast conference, and that's how I found out about you and the Podcast Discovery Center and Podcast Mid-Atlantic. So the idea of being someone with disability, myself, I don't have that. I don't have anybody in my family that has a physical disability. Tell me just growing up that way, when you see the world from that point of view, explain to me, from my point of view, how can I appreciate and put myself in your shoes? Is there a way that you can help me appreciate where you're coming from?
Okay, I'm going to relate this to another interview that I did with Amanda Boxtel. And she did, Amanda Boxtel is the first woman in America to be walking in a bionic exoskeleton. And she crowdfunded this exoskeleton. Yes, if you guys want to go back and listen to that interview, please go ahead and please find out more about that interview. But I was doing a presentation with her last week, and one of the kids asked the same question as you did, David. And she gave an example of she had an able-bodied woman who was there with get in her wheelchair. She had one of the teachers model for the kids. And the way he modeled was he got down to the wheelchair user's height. So I think that's one way to do it. Another way to do it, and I think all kids should be taught this, is just to ask the person about their disability. Now, granted, I'm fairly open about my disability. I am almost a little too open about my disability. Some people are not that open, but it's kind enough to ask. And the other thing that people with disabilities like is when able-bodied people help them, simply open up a door at a Starbucks for them, because they have a heck of a time getting a wheelchair through a non-handicapped accessible door. And my life is, surprise, surprise, non-handicapped accessible. And I give you a perfect example. I teach in a classroom one day a week. Do you know that my door into my office is not handicapped accessible? So for me to get outside my office, I have to ask for help from an able-bodied person. And they know when I stand up, they know to get the door for me. So you need to be conscious of who's around you, and you need to talk to the disability community as if they have brains, not necessarily like they have an aid with them, because a lot of disabled people don't, some do, but people like being treated as if they are humans. So I hope that answers your question, David.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think specifically, so you hear about people being offended by it because well, I don't need help, I can do it myself. I think most people, from your point of view, do you appreciate when someone just comes, hey, let me get that for you? Or do you
Well, I still David's feedback, Blake a little so he can hear my answer. There we go. Now I can answer his question in peace. And so what David asked me, and I'll repeat David's question with a different mind. David asked me, do I get offended when people try and help me? No, I have quickly discovered that I had cerebral palsy at the age of 6, aka CT, when I quickly discovered it. So I have accepted the help in my life. I realize now, at almost 30 years old, yes, I'll be 30 years old June 22nd, I realize now that everyone needs help, and I realize now that my generation is moving back into their parents' homes only because they can't afford a house on their own with the economic downturn. And so now I don't feel so bad that I still live with my parents due to a disability, because that's what my generation's doing. But do I get offended when people ask me, can I help? If they ask me in a dummy way, yes. But other than that, no.
Right. Excellent. Good to hear. Another question for you, if you still have time. The podcasting for you, how did you get into it? What was your, thing that pushed you into it?
I wrote a book at age 23. My book, I Karma Win, WIN, could be found on Amazon. 2 weeks after the book came out, my fan base was asking me, how do you do all the amazing stuff you do with a disability, because I truly opened up about my story when I was 23 years old. And the reason why I did that is because I explained it in the book, why I opened up my story at 23 years old. So my fan base said to me, how do you do all this with a disability? And it wasn't my family and friends, even though they bought the book as well, and even though they supported me on this book. And so I thought, okay, if I get on this podcasting mic one more time, and at the time I didn't even know what a podcast was, and I thought, okay, if I get on this podcasting mic one more time and explain that I have cerebral palsy, people are going to tune me out and tune me off, and then it's going to, this podcast isn't going anywhere. So then I thought, well, why not bring people that fascinate me into this podcast? And that's how my podcast journey began. And now I get to interview people about gnomes and Dungeons and Dragons and learn all this stuff that I never, ever, ever thought I would be learning. So there's my lifelong learning story, using my podcast to lifelong learn.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you for sharing that.
Well, you're welcome. You are certainly welcome. And I definitely appreciate what you're doing for the podcast community. And yes, if you guys made it to the end of this interview, homework assignment, go look up Magic and Stills and podcasts, and I'll have the information in the show notes, and the information in the show notes, it will be a clickable link, and then it will just lead you down a gnome hall that you won't get yourself out of anytime soon. It will lead you to a gnome's house that you won't get yourself out of anytime soon. And so I appreciate what you're doing with Dungeons and Dragons, David, and I appreciate that this whole podcasting thing is a family affair now. And I hope you guys enjoyed another fabulous episode. I'm sorry if you guys thought I lost my mind, but I thought I would bring David on this podcast to explain more about Dungeons and Dragons and more about what he's doing with the 21st century Dungeons and Dragons. So I'm sorry if you have now thought I have lost my mind, but this podcast is sponsored by Grace by Grit. Grace by Grit is a clothing line out of California, and they're giving you 20% off code. Since David mentioned Twitter, this podcast is also sponsored by Go Kitter, K-I-T-T-E-R, and what Kitter does is you compose a tweet on a desktop, and they put the hashtag with it, and tweet David at his Twitter handle at Dungeons and Dragons, and as we said, it's all on the website, and tell him how you're going to support him and how you're going to support the podcast. And please, 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 and I'm sure David will echo this with me, if you listen to any independent podcaster, please leave them a review and tell them how you much enjoyed the podcast. And I'm sure David will echo me on that. And I appreciate you guys listening to this episode, and we still see where this podcast goes. Thanks to you guys.
Win, thank you so much. It was a pleasure speaking with you. Really